Can you talk more about submission or surrender?
There is a scene in the movie Fight Club, and I know you know the scene really well because you made the movie.
It's true.
You know, it's Brad Pitt. I don't really remember it too well, but you know, I'll kind of just make it up. He like walks into a 7-Eleven, and I think it's an Indian guy behind the register, and he says, "Is this what you want to do?" And the guy says, "No." So you don't really want to be working at 7-Eleven? He says, "No." He says, "So what are you doing here?" She's like, "I need the money, or I need to work something." And he kind of grabs this guy by the neck, pulls him out. And it's Brad Pitt, you know. He's like Godzilla, so no one can fight him. So the guy is pushed to the ground. He's sitting on his knees. And Brad Pitt puts a gun in the back of his head. And he says, and the guy's hand goes up, you know. And he says, I'm going to come here next week or tomorrow. If I see you here, I'll shoot your brains out. I think if you were just to kind of analyze that particular scene, there is something about Brad Pitt that forces this guy to be very, very honest, the clerk. I mean, you have all these customers coming and going, but Brad Pitt comes in and says, I want a Slurpee and I want Cheetos. And the guy says, $2.25. He says, here's $5, keep the change. Do you really want to be here? Nobody asks those kinds of questions. But there is something about Brad Pitt. It's about, you know, what we talked about a few minutes ago. Some people have certain things. You don't know what it is, but you kind of just gravitate towards it. They undress you. They make you feel safe, and they make you feel comfortable. And it's like all these masks or layers or protective gears you had because you wanted to protect various parts of yourself, they're kind of just removed, you know. And for the first time in your life, you taste your tongue saying things that are honest. You know, I really don't want to be here. I mean, once that intuition comes to life, you have an act of, you know, surrender that's taking place. But it's not going to last. Remember, for anything to last, it has to have become a habit. For something to become a habit, you must have been addicted to doing the same thing over and over and over. And through addiction, you form habits. Through habits, desires, specific desires are created. You know? And those desires have specific emotions. Those emotions have specific agendas. You have a specific purpose, you know. Brad Pitt has power. Physical power, emotional power. And the clerk finds himself to be profoundly weak in his presence. That's one type of strength. Then the physical prowess, the physical strength comes into place. He grabs the guy by his neck, and the guy can't do anything. And that becomes physical surrender. He's dragged out. Okay? And Brad Pitt does something even more, you know, terrifying, which is he pulls out a gun. Brad Pitt had emotional power, he had physical power, now he adds more to his strength, which means that this Indian clerk will now be pushed into more submission. you know. You know, I was, I'm sure there's a movie, it's the back of my mind, but I forget the name or even the scene, but since I spoke about Freud this morning to people, you know, when Freud was a kid, he used to see his father just being pushed to the ground by people who believe that Jews are poison to society or to humanity. You know, what would you do as a 10-year-old kid when you see your father being pushed around? What do you do as a 40-year-old man when you're underground bleeding and your son is there watching you? It's such a miserable, sad, tragic place to be in life, where you as a son can't do much, and you as a father, kind of you lose a certain image that your son held to be sacred, you know. You're this Indian clerk, you know, and your physical body is not small, you're like big, and yet Brad Pitt overpowers you, and then you're in the street with your hands up. And I don't know if he goes back to the place to see if the guy is still working there or not. He's not in love with Brad Pitt, but he's certainly in love with his power. To kind of bore you, my right shoulder just doesn't function anymore. I am really just tired of fighting with it. I don't massage it anymore. I don't put ice on it or heat pad on it anymore. I've just given up. I can't do anything. And I have accepted defeat. Next week I'll do an MRI. And from what little they've told me, it's either injection or surgery. That's submission. There's a good loss of autonomy in not being able to use your shoulder. I mean, if I was a couch potato just sitting and watching TV, no big deal. But I like to build things. I like to break things. I like to move around. You know? Sometimes you submit because you realize that, you know, you've just done too much damage and there is no way of fixing it on your own. And you should be wise enough to accept the fact that you messed up and be ready for the consequences. That's one way of submission. I'm not in love with pain. I'm not in love with the fact that my shoulder is out of commission and could be for months. Just realized I'm in pain and I can't do much. If by there's also, you know, these moments that all of us have, which is, Cassie, by the way, you should sit however you're comfortable.
Sorry.
No, I'm serious. You should sit however you're comfortable. You know, it's good to kind of endure pain, but it's also good to realize it's really not necessary to always be in pain. For what? You want to stretch out your legs, stretch out your legs. You know, if Lula doesn't like it, well, too bad for Lula.
Yeah.
If Amir doesn't like it, well, too bad for Amir. You know. Submission is very, very difficult. And I'm sure we've talked about this before, but if you go back in time, your daughter is what, 3 or 4? So when she came out of you, she screamed. Saying, I can't believe I'm here. And I can't believe these are my parents. And so she screams. And if you don't pay her attention, if you don't give her care, she's going to scream some more. She is an individual. She cares for her well-being. She wants security. It starts the moment she comes out, even before that, while she's in your tummy. She tells you when you need to sit. She tells you what foods you can't eat. She tells you what food you should eat. I mean, you have to understand that this thing we call human ego, this individualism, it starts so early in life, before you actually come out of the womb, you know. You're nursed. If you don't give your kid, you know, some good punches on the back until they burp, they're going to scream and shout. They won't leave you alone. You'll be robbed of sleep, of rest. They're not going to submit to pain. They're not going to submit to discomfort. They're not going to submit to the fact that you as a mother haven't slept for 48 hours. They don't care about any of that stuff. You are nobody. What's important is their pain. What's important is their discomfort. Okay? Now, you fast forward infancy all the way to about 20. Do you know how big and how grand and how powerful your sense of self is? And now you fall in love. How many times will it take for this guy not to answer your text that you're going to come out and say, you know what? I'm going to teach you a couple of things. What happens when you don't reply to my texts? You know? So you go, you slash his tires, and when he comes out, you'll kind of sit back and say, see, that's what you get. You know? Because whatever self you have, it demands respect. Even if you're a drug dealer, you want people to respect you. Even if you're homeless, you want people to respect you. Okay? Now, you're a woman and you go to buy sahib, and you're 50. You've had experiences, Cassie, and they've been good experiences. You've had great insights about things. Every one of us in this room, we have a good amount of wisdom inside us. And you go somewhere and the guy looks at you and says, you're an idiot. What do you mean? You're an idiot. Well, you know, I went to Yale. Who cares you went to Yale? It's because of Yale that you're an idiot. And you know, you're a human being and you love as a human being. And human beings are good for only one thing. We are all tax collectors. You give your love, but there are expectations. Okay? I mean, look at that thick, fat book, Daughter of Fire. It's filled with anger and doubt. She loves deeply, intensely. She can't submit, she can't surrender. You know? You know, I can text you and say, Cassie, please come to the house Thursday at 6 o'clock. Okay, you will surrender that time to me. And you will drag your body here and you will surrender your body by sitting there. That's great. But as you're sitting, you're thinking about your daughter. You're thinking about your husband. You're thinking about the house you're going to buy. You're thinking about the class you have to teach tomorrow. And though physically you have surrendered, mentally, oh no, you're far away. And you're rebellious. And let's just say I say something that captures your interest. And now, you know, you have submitted your intellect to me. But what can your intellect really do? What I say goes into your head. It becomes, you know, data here, a data there, a piece of information here, a piece of information there. What are you going to do with that? Okay. And then I say, Cassie, it's good that you have surrendered physically. It's really good that you sit there and listen to me. But I still feel that emotionally, you're not there. And good teachers want all of you, Cassie. They want your body, they want your mind, and they want your emotions. Body here, mind and emotions elsewhere doesn't do anything. And this idea that you don't have to be present as long as you can think about, no. That's for a very, very advanced stage. You know? You know, you have to kind of go back to some extent, Charles Darwin and what he says about, you know, organisms' desire to survive. Everything physical about your life and all the desires they've created inside you, they will do whatever they can to continue their survival. Now, you may hate your husband, you may hate your father, you may want to get rid of them, but that's a living organism inside you which has guided you for the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Do you really think that just because you desire to get rid of it is going to walk away so easily? No. You know, you can be very poetic. I mean, Daughter of Fire certainly is. Let me be the dust under your feet. That's great. Genius. Yeah. Or Indians, you know, in their scripture they can say, yeah, why don't you be like the earth? You know, look at the earth. Some people pour water on it. Some people pee on it. And it takes both equally. Be that way. Really? Be like the earth. You want a human being to be like the earth, accepting of everything that's like poured on it. Flowers and trash. You know, no one tells you it's a very advanced place of existence. Um, what I think usually happens is when you hang out with a Socrates, eventually you will have the voice of Socrates, you'll have the emotions of the Socrates, and the intellect of Socrates, even maybe the soul of Socrates. But you always want to go back and be Cassie. And every time you want to go back and be Cassie, conflicts begin. And there is no way to avoid it until you are really willing, now that you have found your cross, you're willing to carry it. That's the ultimate place to be. Submission, acceptance, thy will be done. It's, they're exotic concepts. They're just very, very difficult because you have to lose so much. When I told you the story last week where when I came into this house, there was nothing in it. The only way this house will be the way I first saw it, empty, is for me to move. Or for me to sell the house. That the house will experience itself naked. Once again, being able to receive sofas and couches and this and that from the new people who are going to move in. The idea of thy will be done. Imagine you, Socrates, and you tell Socrates, thy will be done. Socrates has a lifestyle, Cassie. It's a physical lifestyle. He is married. He just doesn't care for his wife. It's a physical lifestyle. He has children. He just doesn't care for them. That's a fact of his life. He talks to people, he's always around people, but he's got no friends. When you tell Socrates, thy will be done, do whatever you want to me, you know what that means? If you want to surrender to Socrates, you stay married. But you stay married on paper. Who can do that? And it may be really somewhat an unfair assessment because every Socrates who finds a Plato with a certain capacity. I can follow Socrates for about 10 years, then on my own. I don't want to follow him anymore. The problem of surrender in some ways it kind of has its roots in despair, in regret, in remorse, in guilt, in weakness, incompetence, sloth, distractions, unhappiness, misery. You know, it's such a joke. The word Islam, meaning to submit, to surrender. And then you have like 1 billion Muslims. I mean, it's great that they have a title that they give themselves, that they're Muslims. But to submit? The greater your love, the deeper your submission, the more you can sacrifice. I know you know the story much better than I, Cassie. I think it's Ninsun, Gilgamesh's mother, who turns to the gods and says to them, "Why have you given me a son whose heart knows no rest?"
Mm.
There is such a sense of estrangement, not belonging in Gilgamesh. And he finds his Sabbath by falling in love with Enkidu. But he hadn't yet matured in love. And so Enkidu had to be taken away from him at the right time though. You know, when you lose a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband, when they leave you or when they die, a few weeks later you find yourself another companion. Gilgamesh submitted and surrendered himself to this knowledge, this understanding. All things physical come and go. You know, you love your child as any good parent would. Layla will do to you what you have done to your parents. You moved away. You're living your life. Once in a while you call your parents. Once in a while you go visit them. You don't have to wait until Layla is like 55 to experience this. Just observe what you have done, what I have done, what she has done, all of us here. You know how difficult it is to just surrender to that understanding? It will devastate you. And you understand, but you haven't yet taken action. In other words, the understanding only has the spirit. It hasn't come down as above, so below. You know? Because if you were to take that understanding, bring it down here, you'll be very, very indifferent towards how your daughter is, how she screams. It doesn't mean you won't care. It just means you won't care as much. And if it has taken you 20, 30 years to figure certain things out, you're going to look at your child and say, it's going to take her about 50 years. I met you at a time where there were no cell phones. no CDs, no James Bonds. You know, I would come to Sierra College on my horse.
Oh no.
You know, if you go to the example that we talked about last week about Gurdjieff calling people at like 6 o'clock, telling them we have a gathering at 7.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to know how many people have really surrendered to the understanding that physical life has nothing to offer them, that people have nothing to offer them, that the only person who's able to offer them anything worth offering is Gurdjieff. And that's too much of a demand on people, you know. And remember, whenever you want to talk about surrender, always, always, always keep in mind the 7 deadly sins. Maybe you want to go home and write tonight. Your physical body will create limitations, and then sloth will overcome you. Maybe as you're writing, you realize how incompetent you are, but pride will overcome you. Then as you want to write some more, you realize you're becoming really, really angry at the stuff you're writing about. Then wrath will overcome you. And all those 7 components, you know, are obstacles to surrender. You know, who doesn't like sloth? Man, it's good to be lazy and comfortable. You know? And you want more of it. It's called gluttony. You don't have to just keep looking at an eclair and say, I want that, more of that. No. You can just like more of sloth. You know? You may just want more of anger. You know, you may think too highly of yourself, and then you want just your ego to be inflated some more, so you can have a, you know, big chunk of pride inside you. You can never have surrender without humility, and you can never have humility in the presence of the 7 deadly sins. Impossible.